We know that the Ukrainian Air Force says that an ICBM was used. That's in their statement published this morning. Some of the Western officials that I've been talking to say they are not sure about this. They think it could be another sort of ballistic missile. Russia has, of course, used many ballistic missiles in its war against Ukraine. And just to remind your viewers, a ballistic missile is one that goes up and down in a ballistic arc, as opposed to a cruise missile that goes closer to the ground, flies like an aeroplane, flies through the air. So if the Ukrainian statement is correct, it would be a big deal. It would be the first ever use of an ICBM in conflict. But I think we still have to establish some of the facts with clarity.
Now, if this was the case, though, but ICBMs are designed for nuclear warheads. Now, can this be seen as perhaps a grave warning from Vladimir Putin, given the events of the past week where both the US and the UK have approved the use of shorter range relatively to ICBMs missiles by Ukraine?
Yes, to use an ICBM would be in some ways a strange military choice. If it was fired from the region of Astrakhan, which is what the Ukrainian Air Force says, the missile would have traveled about 800 kilometers, which is well below the range of an ICBM. That's in fact what we would call a medium-range ballistic missile. And the missile would have had to be on an exceptionally lofted trajectory, that is extremely sharp up and down angle, to be able to fly such a short range. It would have likely been very inaccurate in that range. And these ICBMs, as you say, are not designed to carry conventional payloads. And so it would have probably had to have had a dummy or test warhead, which again would have limited the military utility it would have had. So the purpose of this, if it was an ICBM, would clearly have been a signal that Russia is escalating to a different type of system, a strategic system. And I think it's fair to say that would have been a response to the use of ATACMS. And of course, as we saw yesterday, British Storm Shadow cruise missiles inside Russia for the very first time.
And I suppose in the scheme of this very long, protracted war, Shashank, how is this up to the ante in this conflict?
Well, we've seen a steady escalation on all sides as time has gone on, beginning with the provision of ever more advanced weapons to Ukraine. At first, small weapons, then tanks, then fighter jets, then advanced ballistic missiles. And on the Russian side, of course, we have also seen different types of escalation, not just inside Ukraine in terms of the nature of the weapons being used, but last week, over the weekend, we also saw the second biggest air attack on Ukraine since the autumn of 2022. So Russia is escalating in that sense. And Russia is also escalating through what we call horizontal escalation. It's conducting intensified sabotage, subversion, attempted assassination inside Europe. And that is another way by which it is pushing back at the West, saying, if you supply Ukraine, we will take steps to impose a cost on you as well.
Yeah, clearly both sides of the conflict are raising the stakes in this war. But I suppose when you look geographically, how much concern is there in Europe, particularly from Ukraine's NATO allies?
There's a great deal of concern for two reasons. One of them is that Russian sabotage has been crossing various red lines in the past 12 months. You may recall the story of the explosive packages placed on airliners, on cargo airliners by Russian intelligence services. Those have been unearthed, I think, in Leipzig, in other places. So there's grave concern Russia may cross a line by causing loss of life in Europe that may individually seem like a small incident, but cumulatively could cross the threshold of Article 5, which is the mutual defense guarantee of the NATO alliance. The second concern is, of course, with Donald Trump arriving in the presidency in January after the inauguration date on January 20th, there are significant European concerns over how much the United States will continue to meet its defense obligations to Europe. And that would leave Europe in a vulnerable situation, particularly if Ukraine's front lines are collapsing at the same time. So I think the mood in Europe right now is uncertain, is anxious, is concerned.
So looking further ahead, given what you've just said about Donald Trump and what he might do, but in the short term, how would we expect Washington and the Biden administration to react?
I think that they have been trying to move very cautiously forward with the plans to give Ukraine the right to use ATACMS inside Russia. They have done so in response to what they see as Russian escalation, particularly the involvement of North Korean troops inside Kursk province in Russia. But the Biden administration is walking a fine line here. It doesn't want to take dramatic steps that would escalate the conflict in ways that might tie the hands of the successor administration of the Trump administration. At the same time, it can't sit back and simply do nothing. So it has walked this very fine line, giving Ukraine the right to expand the use of these weapons, but doing so in a very cautious way. In other words, signaling this in advance, communicating it publicly rather than having it done by surprise. So I don't think we'll see any dramatic steps by the Biden administration. The priority for them will be getting the remaining American aid dollars out of the door to Ukraine prior to Donald Trump entering the White House.
Okay, Shashank Joshi in London, thanks very much for your analysis as always.
Thank you.